Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Tech Blueprint podcast. This is episode 4, and if you are a founder, aspiring entrepreneur, or just curious about how venture capital really works in Ireland, then this one is for you. I'm joined by DC Cahalane, who is a partner at Sure Valley, who spent years backing and supporting some of those exciting early stage companies in Ireland and the UK, and with a particular focus on high growth sectors like AI, immersive tech, and cybersecurity. In this conversation, we'll cover the current state of VC funding in Ireland, what investors are really looking for when it comes to founders, and the common mistakes startups make when raising capital. We'll also explore the AI landscape from where the genuine opportunities lie to how Ireland can position itself as a leader in this rapidly evolving space. And to round things off, DC shares one of his bolder predictions for where AI and venture capital in Ireland are headed over the next 5 years. So, yeah, let's get into it. Afternoon, DC. Take two. Thanks very much for joining me today.
You're very welcome. It's been ages since I saw you.
Yeah, perfect. Yes, a couple of things I suppose I'd said when we tried this before, some computer issues. I wanted to talk about with you today in terms of like venture capital in Ireland and AI and emerging tech. Look, if you're happy enough, keen to sort of get stuck in and ask question one. So, what's the current take on the VC landscape in Ireland? Would you say at the minute?
Honestly, look, I'm 2 years into the new gig now. You know, I joined SVV as a partner 2 years ago. Before that, obviously, had been massively exposed to the venture ecosystem and all that, both as a founder and then as somebody, you know, working inside in Dogpatch and a bunch of other roles. I honestly think like it's a tough question, right? Because a lot of it depends on what end of the market you're talking about. Like,
yeah.
if you're just getting started, if you're talking about that pre-seed and seed stage of investment, there's a lot of active funds in Ireland now. We're seeing a lot of UK funds, like people like Playfair and Early Bird and a bunch of others, Amadeus, all being active as well. So really, the founders are spoiled for choice, really, in terms of plenty of money at that level. Now, to be transparent, it's no easier to get the money. Like the reality is the availability of money is balanced out a little bit by the fact that obviously we're hitting this third technology wave in terms of AI.
Yeah.
And, you know, not every venture firm is blessed like we are to have been investing in AI for the last 8 years. So for a lot of VCs, you know, they're still getting to grips with what makes a VC, what makes a good investable opportunity in this AI landscape. So therefore, you know, you're still you're still looking for great technology, great founders. You know, the one thing I would say is I think founders need to think a lot about, just because you have a great AI technology doesn't mean that you have a great AI business. Like those two things, you have to prove that you have great technology, but you also have to prove that you have a great business. I think then on the other end of the scale, and I know there's been like lots of public commentary about this, you know, if you're a company that's raised pre-seed and seed, and now you're into that real scaling phase, you're looking to raise a Series A or beyond, we're still challenged. Like, you still fundamentally have to go overseas for most of that money. And I know Bobby Healy, Mana, the drone company, he was in the papers maybe this weekend or last weekend talking about, you know, that lack of growth capital. You know, we don't, the Irish Stock Exchange, you know, doesn't have a good track record of you know, money for high-end technology companies, and it should. They're a great team there and they have best of intentions, but yeah, that growth capital still really tricky for Irish founders. Plenty of money available at the early stage, but transparently, you know, people have to remember that's, you know, that's money that's being invested. It's not money that's being handed out. So you still have to be able to prove that, you know, you got a good technology, you're good, it's going to be a good business, and you're going to be good stewards of the money. You know, you're going to do your best to give it back in loads, you know.
100%. And on that piece, on the stewards piece, I suppose it leads quite nicely into my next question. Like, you've been a founder yourself, and you mentioned there that, look, you obviously need to have a great product, but you also need to have a great, I suppose, founding team. What would you typically look for when it comes to, you know, a founding team?
Yeah, it's a funny one because like I always kind of say, everybody talks about like what does a good pitch look like, what does a good presentation look like, and here are the 10 slides or the 12 slides, whatever. Honestly, like for me, there's kind of three pieces of information that will tell me an awful lot of what I need to know. The first one is like, are the founders obsessed with solving the problem, right?
Mm.
And there's a big difference between being obsessed with solving the problem and being in love with your solution. And at the moment, there's a lot of AI companies that come up with this mad idea and they're in love with the idea and they're in love with this cool thing they've been able to do with AI, but the market doesn't want it. So for me, I want to meet somebody who, almost like gets a bit manic when they're talking about the problem. They have
Mm.
best example I can think of is Dan Purcell in Cartus. They're like Dan, when you hear Dan pitch his business, it is so passionate about, he was the victim of revenge porn. And he basically now has built probably the world's top solution
Mm.
for, scanning for deep fakes and scanning for the stuff. And the reason being is when he talks about the problem, he's lived the problem, he knows the
Of
problem,
course.
and he's passionate. And Dan will keep changing how the business operates until that problem goes away from the world. So I think one, founders who are passionate about solving a problem, not in love with the solution. Second of all, founders who understand the market that they're going to be selling into. You get a lot at the moment. We're seeing a whole bunch of people build like AI for legal services, and there's a whole bunch of people building that, and they're not lawyers, or they've never been
Yeah.
lawyers, or they know nothing about law firms. Similarly, in your profession, the amount of people who are building like recruiting tools using AI, and I'm like, what experience do you have in recruitment? It's always good if if you're building a disruptive technology in a space, it's always good if the founders understand what the old version of the old solution looked like, because then you're able to determine, well, like, is our disruption that we're making it better, more convenient, faster, cheaper, whatever. If you're kind of just somebody who's just looking at a space and you're kind of making guesswork about the space, that's a really, really, really tough proposition. And I guess the third thing I would say about like what do we look for in founders? There's a kind of a personality trait um which is a kind of a weird combination of driven but open to feedback.
Mm.
I know from being involved in a lot of incubator and accelerator programs over the years, you always talk about like the best founders are the ones who are coachable.
Yeah.
There's a difference between being coachable and having to be led along. But I find that like you're looking for founders who are driven to work. That doesn't mean they have to be workaholics, but they're driven to get a result, and that's usually easier if they're passionate about the problem they're solving.
Of course.
But also are willing to accept that like they may not be experts in everything. So like for us, I feel very blessed that like all of the founders in our portfolio, we have a kind of a really strong two-way relationship with them, because in our case, all four partners in SVV are former founders themselves. So we all speak kind of a common language, I guess.
Yeah. 100%. Would you say there's been, I suppose, a bit of a shift in terms of maybe the mindset of Irish founders in recent years, or would you say that's maybe evolved? Or
Yeah, and there's a way to go yet. All right, there's a way to go. I mean, the fundamental thing, if you look at, if you go to Silicon Valley and look at the mentality there, there's just a take no prisoners,
Hmm.
like, and I find it's great, but there's a negativity to it too, because it is take no prisoners, and there is a kind of a real sense of, for me to succeed, I got to kind of plow other founders out of the way to a certain degree.
yeah,
Um, I find in the UK, there's a lot more collaboration and cooperation between the founders. And if you ask for help, you'll kind of be given help. I think Ireland's superpower is almost the extreme of that, in that like people will just volunteer help. Like you don't even have to ask for it. Like so as a consequence, we kind of all rise and fall collectively together. Um, but there is still like the challenge. I'll give you a very practical example. Like I do a lot of work with universities and university spinouts, and probably the single hardest and the single thing you have to work on most with spin out companies is just getting them into the right mindset. Because, when you're sitting inside in a university, you're hyper focused on the idea, the research, the product, and that's, and like to a degree that allows for the sort of deep tech propositions we see coming out of universities. And then when you take that business out of university, you need to be able to kind of reset the scales and balance. So you're going, okay, well now, in university, that was a product and a piece of research. It was a technology. Now we're out here and now we're a business, and we need to put just as much effort into the business side of things. I do think that there's a little bit of a founder mentality in Ireland where they still think that their initial customers are gonna come inbound to them. They still think it's to go back to your world. They still think if they just put out the job advert, the very best candidates are just going to show up at their door, versus having to go out and headhunt and having to go out and pick the candidates. I think you see that an awful lot more in the US, where the default is like, nobody's going to come to buy our product. We have to go out and sell to them, But honestly, you're seeing, like, what I would say is, I think in Ireland, we're seeing a huge change in that mentality. And honestly, I personally believe it's brought on by, I think we're finally unlocking that superpower that was given to us by all these FDIs setting up in Ireland, and now having access to Salesforce and HubSpot, and some of the very best salespeople in the world now coming out and being part of the ecosystem. People going in, doing a couple of years in Salesforce, now coming out and working in startups. So I do think the commercial edge is a lot stronger, but it could definitely be like, we do have a very generous system of supports in Ireland through Enterprise Ireland, the Leos and stuff. And there can sometimes too much support can create a safety blanket. You want to try and back the founders who take advantage of the safety blanket, but it's a safety blanket. It's not meant to be a whole game. You're meant to power on, drive on, instead of focusing on spending your investors' money on cool stuff, you should be delighted for the day where you get to spend customers' money on cool stuff.
100%. That's a good way of putting it. We've talked about, I suppose, the things that you would ideally look for, in a founding team and in a company and things like that. But what maybe are some of the things you don't look for? I mean, what are some of the common mistakes that your startups are making when maybe you're approaching VCs? And I suppose just things that they maybe shouldn't do.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of red flags. Like some of them are practical and some of them are more psychological, I guess. The one thing I would say is, first of all, like, please understand what VC is and isn't. Right? That sounds like a really basic one, but I often feel like it's a bit like going to the bank manager for a mortgage and having done no homework whatsoever. You arrive in to apply for your mortgage, and your whole bank account is full of Paddy Power transactions. Like we've all anecdotally been told that's not going to be a good thing. You 50% of your transactions are going to the pub, eating at McDonald's, and gambling. Because you do get it. You do get an awful lot of people coming on, and I think they fundamentally misunderstand what venture capital is, and the fact that up until 10, 15 years ago, venture capital was finance for scaling. Venture capital is not, in most cases, finance for building your prototype. That level of stuff. Very few startups are in a position where the very, very first investor that they get is a VC, because fundamentally, I am not spending my own money. I'm spending our investors' money. So I have to have very solid traction points. I have to have very solid evidence in order for me to be able to take a chance on putting my investors' money into you. Whereas if you think of an angel investor, an angel investor is investing their own personal money. They can take on as much risk as they want. They can go, hey, I like Jack's beard. He seems trustworthy. Here is some money. It is, and I'm being facetious, but I think it's important to realize that angel investors, venture capitalists, and I guess even if you take stuff like grant money, whether it be Enterprise Ireland or other organizations, they may all be investing in you, but they do all have different outcomes that they're looking for. I often think a lot of founders don't think about that. So, that's point one. Point two would be there are no two VCs that are alike. So this notion of we'll get a list of all the VC firms in Ireland, we'll just email every one of them. Like, first of all, there's very little competition goes on in venture capital in any market, because actually every single VC has a particular investment thesis and has a very particular area that they invest in, check size they write, outcome that they're looking for, all these things. And the challenge is that, like, you have to fit that criteria in order to be investable by them. And if you don't fit their criteria, it's not like I think a lot of people think it's optional. Like they think like, hey, we'll get on to DC because DC's an investor and we're doing our new energy drink company. And like, I know he doesn't normally do any drinks, but maybe we'll convince him to do it. Like, we're an enterprise AI investor. If I took my investors' money and invested in your energy drinks company, I'm pretty sure I end up in jail.
Yeah.
Like that is about as obvious as a case of fraud as you can come up. But still, a lot of founders do not do their homework, and then actually, they come on and you kind of say, oh, look, it's what you're doing is great. It's just not in thesis for us. It's not what we've been. And then they get cranky at you. And it's like, really? Like, I know you're allowed to get cranky at your bank manager when he turns down your mortgage, but like here, it's like, you came in looking for a mortgage and told me you want to spend the money on a boat. You know what I mean? It's not my thing. That would be my second fundamental thing where I think people go wrong. The third one for me is and I kind of preach that. Like, it's I mentioned earlier about a great criteria of a team being driven. Like, velocity is so velocity is the whole game when it comes to startups, especially these days when it comes to AI. And like, if somebody came in to me looking for an investment these days, like, there is no excuse whatsoever for you not to have an MVP of the software, because like, you can build it in Lovable or something in a weekend. And it, again, like, we're not asking, like, it's not like all you need to do is prove like you have some sort of chops to us, So I think you want your founders to be pushing forward all the time. And if they come into you and they're like, oh, we're waiting for our university to get back to us on this, or oh, we're waiting to hear about this grant, or oh, we're waiting to do this before we take the next step, like, that would be a kind of a red flag for me, because like, the very nature of entrepreneurship is you don't know what's around the next corner. You know what? Whatever's around the next corner is still around the next corner, no matter how fast you're walking. So the question is like everything these days, because of the acceleration of AI, everything is moving faster. So like, I want founders who move fast. I want founders who, like, I meet them today, and the last thing they ask me on the call is, what's the next step? I'm like, ooh, you're being a little pushy. And then if they don't hear back from me in 24 hours, they're sending me a little message going, any update for us, right? Because the last thing I will say to you about, and this is less of a red flag than just a practicality. I never, ever, ever, ever understood how VCs filled their time when I was a founder. I was like, oh, they're just at events and all this stuff. VC is the hardest job I've ever had in my entire life. I love every minute of every day of it. But in terms of sheer workload, we in SVV, we would have reviewed 3,500 companies last year. There's 11 of us in the company. There's only 9 of us on the investment team. Put one into the other. And when I mean review, I don't mean like just kind of like, oh, we got emails about them. I mean like actually either met them or did Zoom calls with them or something. So there is a massive disconnect. Like, obviously, when you're a founder and you're pitching investors, that's your whole world. The challenge for I would say the challenge for us in VC used to be that, like, just the sheer amount of, I 16 calls today, 9 of them are pitches. So whatever way my day finishes today, I'll make an effort to try and go back and email every one of them back. But like, there's practicalities. Like, I don't know what the next step is on the investment journey until I talk to some of my colleagues in here and we have a bit of a chin wag. And like, when we sit down to do that, like, we could have 30 or 40 companies to go through. So I think one, I always say to founders, ask what the process is. Like, ask the questions. What's your fund thesis? How do you invest? What sort of companies do you invest? Blah, 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 blah. And then ask, like, at the end of the call, ask what the process is going to be, over the next couple of weeks. Give them the opportunity to say, well, look, we'd normally be back to you in 5 days, but actually next week is the Web Summit or SaaS Stock or whatever. So actually the team is off site. So it might be 2 weeks. I don't want anybody to have sympathy for VCs, but I will say, just be realistic about, if they're talking to you, they're talking to 20 other companies as well, and they're trying to be fair to everybody with the allocation of their time.
100%. AI, hot talking point. I don't think I've stopped talking about it for
I don't personally believe it's no.
To be honest, what kinds of AI startups are you most excited about right now, DC?
So that's an interesting question. Like, I mean, as I said, and I don't mean to keep rubbing it into my colleagues in the industry, but like, we've been doing this eight years now. The team are experienced in doing AI. There are plenty of VC funds out there who are 8 months in or 18 months in. So we've kind of come out the way somebody described it to me recently, which I absolutely loved, was, it's a bit like when the X Factor was on. For the first 2 years, nobody kind of knew what looked good. By the time they got to the third year, you could kind of spot like who was going to end up in the final or not. It's a bit like that with us. We've had the experience of AI companies that started, 5 or 6 years ago. So like, we're really balanced in terms of looking at the technology and making sure the technology is best in class. Also looking at what it's going to take to actually turn that into a good business. Like some, there's AI enables a huge amount of disruption in industries. Some industries just don't want that disruption. So, that's a factor. Like, for us, we tend to focus on kind of two areas of the market. We focus on investing in AI companies who are building tools for other AI companies. So, like stuff that layers on top of foundational models, that trains models faster, makes them more efficient. With companies like Inephany, which kind of speeds up training times by 10x. We have a company in Manchester called Itibit, who are working with, like, if you're building an AI system that produces large quantities of media assets, Itibit is essentially kind of like the power to store, manage, optimize all that good stuff. We've got companies like Gentech in Dublin, who are kind of sitting in the middle of everything, connecting up all these different MCP servers and all these different tools and stuff that AI agents are going to need. So like, we have that engineering layer stuff. And then the other layer that we're super interested in is where somebody's doing something really deep in a vertical, right? So the way I always kind of say that is, like, if you came to us today and said, hey, we're doing an AI accounting package for SMEs, that's not that interesting for us, because the challenge with going in a big, wide horizontal market is it's kind of too hard. Like, where do you start with your marketing? If you're spreading yourself all over the place, very hard to track. I'd kind of almost rather you come to me and say, hey, we're doing AI accounting software for recruitment businesses, because then I know, okay, well, now who your target is. You can go in, you can measure your effectiveness. And if you crack recruitment, well, then you can go, oh, so actually, do you know what? We could also sell this to accountants, or we could also sell it to somebody else. So for us, it's the applying AI at the application layer in a very specific vertical of business, or, as I said, that engineering layer. But the stuff that's coming out is insane, and the opportunities are huge, because I think early in the AI journey, there was a concern that, like, AI is so important that, like, every big company is just going to do their own, they're going to have their own internal teams and building out stuff. I think what a lot of big companies are realizing now is that sort of like the builder mentality that's needed for AI, because AI is evolving so fast. Very hard to build that inside in a big business. Like we've a company in the UK portfolio called Capture, who work with Lime worldwide on their scooters. And what they is they're the camera app that sits inside in the Lime app that says your bike is parked properly, it's not damaged, it's all this stuff. Lime use it to prove to councils and cities that people are parking their bikes right. But like they had that facility before Capture came in. They were building that in-house. But the challenge was, they had to have this dedicated AI team building out vision models, building out all this sort of stuff. And that just wasn't the core product, which was like build an incredible user experience. So like they literally swapped out their in-house team for the Capture solution. And I do think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think we're going to see a lot of people where big businesses are swapping out, trying to, like, they're just going to go back to building their core products in-house, and hopefully will adopt more and more technology solutions from more and more startups.
100%. How well positioned is Ireland to lead in AI innovation?
Tricky question. I think we're starting to get there, right? I mean, the big challenge for a long while was people still perceived AI as a kind of a technology trend. Like they thought AI was the new fintech or AI was the new medtech. So, very quickly in Ireland, we're brilliant at skepticism in Ireland. We are world-class skeptics. So a lot of them were like, it won't be that good and time will pass. But I think fundamentally what they missed was, AI isn't a technology trend, it's a technology wave. So there've only been 3 technology waves in history. One was the internet, one was mobile phones, and the next one is AI. And the way I kind of say to everybody is like, I don't care if you're a bakery, a coffee shop, a bus company, like there is a role for AI in your business. Can you survive without AI? Of course you can. In the same way that you can survive without the internet, and you can also survive without having mobile phones in your business. But it feels kind of dumb to do that. So I think people are slowly coming around to that idea that like AI and Ireland's role is not just kind of be an enabler of a trend. I think slowly they are realizing it now. We have a few challenges in that, the single biggest factor in being a leader in AI is agility and being able to move fast. And definitely countries like the UK, countries like France, I remember them talking about AI 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah.
In Ireland, we have woken up to it. We have an incredible AI advisory council led by Patricia Scanlon, and with like some of the smartest people in Ireland sitting on it, advising government. But we definitely need to up the pace a little bit. I think because AI is traditionally like deep tech stuff, I think there also might be this general perception, which is like deep tech stuff belongs in a university, is going to take years to develop and all this sort of stuff. And like the reality is with AI, like years have become months, months have become weeks, weeks have become days. So there is a general need to kind of, one, accept that, this is as important to the Irish economy as the internet was. 2, like we have so much potential because we have incredible universities, but more importantly, we have OpenAI, we have Anthropic, we have Amazon, Google, Microsoft. Like we have all these incredible companies embedded in the Irish economy that if we actually position ourselves right, and if we actually go and say, guys, we want to be global leaders in this space, like there's no other country in the world has that footprint in a country as small as Ireland, so therefore can be impactful very, very quickly, But it's like look, technology is always challenging for governments. It's always challenging to move. But I definitely, like, I sit on a number of government boards, and I will say, having sat on them for a number of years, there is an awful lot. Like the big thing I will tell you is civil servants sitting in government departments in Ireland, they really want to know what they should be doing, and they want to know how AI can improve their roles. Is there red tape they have to get through themselves? Absolutely. But I feel a speeding up of progress for sure.
Okay, fantastic. Final question from me, more of a sort of looking ahead bonus type question. What's one bold prediction that you'd make about either AI or VC in Ireland over the next 5 years? Put you on the spot there. Apologies.
No, So I recently wrote an article for the Business Post talking about like where I think entrepreneurship is going to go in Ireland and generally worldwide, and how I think Ireland can be a leader in that space. And I genuinely believe that Ireland is between all, like, all the jigsaw pieces are sitting on a table. We just need to put them together, right? And we need a kind of a national entrepreneurship strategy to put all these pieces together. The example I give it is, I feel like at the moment, we're a bunch of county councils and we're doing a great job filling in potholes, laying down, some local roads, national roads, building the new roundabouts. We're keeping all the traffic moving, right? But what we're not doing is going, you know what, if there was a motorway between Cork and Limerick, economic, like, be massive for the economy. I think we need a national entrepreneurship strategy in Ireland to connect up the pieces of the jigsaw so that we get more than the sum of the parts of what's going on. And I think now is a perfect time for that, because actually, if you were to write down like the 10 things that are difficult about entrepreneurship, I'm pretty sure AI solves 8 of them, right? In the sense that if you are, let's go for the stereotype. If you are a female founder with an incredible business idea, but you're not technically minded, you now have the ability to go to a lovable.dev or something like that. A company that started last November will finish this year on something like 175 million ARR, and tell it your idea and have it build it for you. On the other hand, if you're a bunch of like pure tech nerds who have an amazing product but don't know what to do next, you can have an AI build your business plan. And I genuinely believe that actually, the unlock of AI is going to make it's going to create such huge opportunity, because the other unlock it's going to do is we have all these incredible people working in industry in their, we'll say, 30s and 40s, who now have a whole bunch of industry experience in an area. Now that experience, now in a world where AI tools allow you to build anything for any reason, that experience and unlocking that experience is the whole game. So now you can have somebody who's 31 years of age, has 10 years of it, came out of college, 10 years of experience in an industry. They can sit down at a weekend and go, you know what? I have an idea for a product in this space. So I think AI is the ultimate leveler. I think it creates this kind of entrepreneurship 3.0 mentality of just because, Web 3.0 didn't work, so let's go with entrepreneurship 3.0. And it could be such an unlock. The challenge is it's going to create a scenario where you could very easily see 10 times as many businesses starting every year. And we need to look at all of the support structures that we have in place, from government to universities to programs, accelerators, incubators, venture capital, and everything, and go, okay, if suddenly instead of 3,500 companies, if Sure Valley was getting 35,000 companies next year, how would that work? In our case, we're grand. We've built a whole suite of internal AI agents to manage everything from inbound to scanning decks and turning them into one-page briefs and all that. Like, we use so much AI internally in our business, but we're ready for that. And I think other businesses can get ready for that. It could be given all the tariffy nonsense and all the global trade uncertainty, the ability to go back and actually just empower Irish businesses to grow could be a complete game changer for the Irish economy.
Fantastic. Well, all that's left to say, DC, thanks very, very much for joining me today. Apologies about the mishap on our first attempt, but it was great to have you on.
That's technology.
In
a couple of years, it'll be grand. All podcasts are just done using AI. You'll be an AI, I'll be an AI. We won't have to ever meet or talk.
I think there's something like that at the minute. Is there not? Like I can't remember what it's called.
There's some incredible these avatar generators out there. But I saw one the other day, and fundamentally I thought it was going to create an avatar of me.
Okay.
Let's just say if that was me, like it was we call it the best me. It was kind of me with a bit of Ryan Gosling and a bit of Channing Tatum thrown into it. But what was incredible was like it sits on the Zoom call, and like in my case, I was literally in the car listening to a call and participating. But anybody else, as far as anybody else was concerned, I was sitting in the office. It's going to be great for remote work.
Ridiculous. Hey, who knows? Maybe this is AI. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows? Yeah.
Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Shaq. Great to talk to you.